Welcome to Heart Collaborations, where we explore the heart of wellness, mental and emotional well-being, relationships, personal passions, and thriving parenthood. Hi, I'm Annette.
And I'm Anita. Collectively, we have over 50 years in the educational and mental health arenas. Whether you're looking for information, personal stories, or just a place to feel seen and heard, you're in the right place. Join us as we dive into conversations that inspire, empower, help you grow, and add a little laughter to your life.
The content presented in this episode or any others should not be considered therapy and is not prescriptive. If you have questions or concerns about mental health, contact your primary care physician or local mental health provider. The opinions expressed are solely ours and are not representative of our employers or coworkers.
Thank you for joining us. Glad that you are here. Please take a seat at the table as we begin to discuss
The Anxious Generation, Part 1. And Jonathan Haidt calls Part 1 the tidal wave.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
Rightfully so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, just like you said, a tsunami, right?
Yeah, we were talking and I was like, I think it was a tsunami, not a tidal wave.
Yeah. And when I think of a tsunami, I think of like out of control.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like everything is out of control, overwhelming, lots of anxiety because we don't know. We have a lot of fears. So that's what comes to mind to me when we talk about this tidal wave.
Right.
And kind of what we're seeing, you know, that surge of an increase of suicidology, anxiety, and depression.
Definitely. So chapter 1 is the surge of suffering. What the heck is the suffering that's going on?
I'm suffering as a parent. I mean, you know, it's on a serious note, though. I mean, it's tough to be a parent, but it's tougher even now to be a parent with all this technology.
Yeah. And, you know, it's funny. You said as a parent, it can also be as a spouse. Like if your spouse is real, and it could be me, it could be them, who knows. But if your spouse is really tied into, you know, that technology piece, then yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we are seeing a lot of people feeling lonely, you know, lots of people feeling depressed. But I think most importantly, let's talk about our youth and how it's impacting our youth because that impacts all our families, you know, so.
Well, and, you know, as far as families and youth, another thing that there's been a huge increase in, I think, is just conflict within the family on a daily basis, right?
Yeah.
Used to, you know, kids got home from school, they went out to play, right? And they flickered the light when you're supposed to come in.
Yeah.
Probably less conflict.
And they did their chores before they got on the computer.
They're inside the house now. So there seems to be more conflict, though, really.
But, you know, the conflict really comes when I tell my daughter, get off that computer. Get off that computer. Mom, wait, I'm in a game. And it's like, okay, so now I got to hold dinner because you're on a game.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a constant battle, but it's also, you know, parents are trying to set boundaries as best they can, but it gets confusing sometimes for a parent.
It's hard because, you know, for instance, if you have a child that has a hard time making friends, you know, at school, but they're on Discord and they have tons of friends and they're watching a movie and they're laughing and giggling and he's having these conversations and you're like, you need to get off technology. Well, is that really a bad thing?
Yeah.
You know?
So I think, you know, the answer to that is varied in a lot of different situations. But I think that question that you're asking, I was with a parent the other day, a friend, and they were just kind of throwing it out there to the group. You know, they were questioning, when is it okay? When is it not okay?
Yeah.
When is it a help? When is it a hindrance? So it's just not as clear cut as we sometimes may think. And when parents do limit access,
Whew. Well, if you've read the first chapter of the tidal wave,
yeah,
you'll read the story of Emily.
I know that story really struck you.
Yeah, it just, you know, when I think about it, I'm like, really? Like, I don't think I mean, I've been in trouble before growing up, believe me. I did my own things growing up. But, I never did ever think about hurting myself or, just doing some type of harm to myself because I'm not going to be allowed to go to somebody's house or, and I feel like, when you're online and you're playing, well,
And that was the case with Emily, right?
yeah, that was the case
Remind
with Emily.
us a little bit about that, or for the people who haven't maybe heard that.
So, and it's all about finding that balance. Like I'm saying, is it good for them to be on the internet for how long? I feel like, depending on, I know for me at home, our rule is, you get off whenever we're going to have dinner. You get off when we're watching a movie, family time. You're off. If it's your own free time and you want to spend it on the computer, you can. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that, we're talking about just where parents are and where families are and trying to figure out, but I think we're going to find as we continue to go through this book that we have more power than what we think we have. And so that's exciting to me.
Yeah, when I think about that, I think about, I guess, co-parenting with friends. I know that sounds kind of weird, but,
I like that idea, actually.
Having a conversation with my children's friends as far as, okay, well, what are some of the rules in your home? And what kind of, not that we're going to copy, but I would like to know so that, okay, I'm open-minded and I can kind of stream, okay, well, maybe I am being rigid as far as, okay, no, you cannot have a phone or you cannot be, on past 5 o'clock. So I feel like that would help my children as far as not feeling lonely. And it would help me as a parent knowing that, what, someone else is questioning the same thing I'm questioning.
Right. Jonathan Haidt, the title of the book, The Anxious Generation, and we talk a lot about anxiety as a society, but I'm not sure if we're always clear about really what does that mean? What is the definition of anxiety? What's the definition of depression? And when we think about anxiety, it shows up. It's a perceived. It's a fear, right, of a perceived threat, either real
or unknown.
Yeah, right. And it shows up in our bodies and our minds in lots of different ways. It could be a tightening of the chest.
For me, it's sweating at the palms, the hands.
Me too. You could, if you touch mine right now, you would feel that. But yeah, it can be an upset stomach. It could be an unclear head as far as thinking goes. It could be a rapid heartbeat, and so it shows up in real ways in our bodies and our minds.
Just a fear.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
and then I know in the past we've used kind of the rabbit as like an analogy. And I was saying to a friend the other day that we have a lot of rabbits in my house, okay? I can't hardly walk out without seeing 3 or 4 rabbits in the front yard. And so I've been able to watch them a lot. And that rabbit will be out there just having a great time, right? Hopping around, doing his thing, playing. And I'll walk out and that rabbit will do a couple of different things maybe. One, it will freeze and it'll be like,
oh yeah,
because it's perceived danger, right? So its body is reacting. Another thing it might be is dart, right?
Yep.
And we're like that as well. So our bodies respond to fear, be it, a clear danger, a real danger, or a fake danger,
similar,
right?
Yeah, similar behaviors. We freeze or fawn or flight or fight.
And then what about depression? How do we kind of want to define depression and think about depression?
Well, when I think about depression, I mean, we think about, sadness too, but I think a lot of that for our teens, it's a lot of that being lonely. It's a lot of that not being included, not having your people,
So that can kind of start those feelings of,
it stirs the pot.
depression or sadness.
It's like building a stew, and you're adding to it, and some of that is that loneliness feeling, right? The inclusion, not being included. you know, and now we're seeing maybe grades are suffering. You're not doing the best. So now, you know,
So
we
some
throw
change in
that.
behavior.
Yeah.
Might be change in appetite. It might be change in sleeping patterns.
Yeah.
Usually for 2 or more weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, and then we're sad all this time, and we've been sad for a few months, and we just can't shake that feeling, you know, and it stays.
Right.
And once it stays, then it starts going inward, and that's
okay.
kind of when we start seeing the self-cutting, self-hatred, you know,
Self-loathing.
yeah, yeah, and then we see the suicidology.
So one of the things that I love about Jonathan Haidt's book is the background facts, right? The data. And, you know, he starts off, and one of the big ones that stood out to me was the data about depression. And between 2010 and 2012, he shows that there was an increase of girls in terms of depression, 145%.
Yeah.
And then for boys, 161%. So
Those numbers are large. Very
think-
large.
it's definitely got to, you know, as a family, we're thinking about the irritation, but he's pointing out this isn't just an irritation that we're experiencing. This is a mental health crisis.
Yes. Even the World Health Organization has said we are in a health crisis, you know, with large numbers of, you know, like we said, sociology, depression, anxiety. So,
Yeah, so Jonathan Haidt, says there's a couple of clues as to what was going on and why we're at, you know, where we're at. And the first clue is that he talks about a rise in those disorders that we're talking about, anxiety and depression, right?
Yeah.
Statistically, it's just there. And then the second clue was how it seems to be focused or manifested more in Gen Z. And for example, he gives a chart, and it's from 2008 to 2020. He breaks it down by age. This was like one of my favorite stats in the book, because he's not only making an association, he's saying this is causation. He's saying what is going on isn't just about association, but causation, and I'm going to show and prove you why.
Yeah.
And when he looked at ages 18 through 25, he saw there was a 139% increase in anxiety. For ages 26 to 34, he said there was a 103%
yeah.
increase. And then ages 35 to 49, a 52% increase. And then ages 50 plus, an 8% increase. Now, when you look at those numbers, when you hear those numbers, what comes to mind? What do you think? What conclusions are you drawing from that?
Well, one, I'm glad I'm in the 50 plus group because it's only 8%, right?
Yeah, I'll be there in a few years.
But but when I think about it, I'm like, oh gosh, these young people from 18 to 25 at a rate of 139%.
139%?
That's
What?
wild.
Yeah.
You know, and now I'm thinking, how is it impacting them? You know,
Right.
so he's saying we're seeing all these causalities, right? But now I'm thinking, okay, it's not only the Gen Z that we're looking at because they're in a home and they have siblings. So it's kind of like connected and taking, you know, everybody else. It's like what do you call those? One of those things that it's like a ripple.
Oh, okay.
You know?
Yeah, right.
You know, it's like a
Definitely,
ripple.
It's affecting everybody for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
And I think those Gen Z kids, I think they were born from like 1997 to 2012, I believe. So that's kind of the age group of that Gen Z. But one of the things that struck me about those percentages that we just talked about is that the world, we're all living in the same world, right? In terms of economic, we're all living, no matter the age, everybody's experiencing the same economics, the same political climate, the same wars or no wars, like weather, all those kinds of things that affect our life. All those things are the same, But what's the deviant? What's the difference?
I just looking at those numbers, it's the amount we spend on the computer. Because I'm thinking the 50 plus, one, we don't know how to work it. We got to ask for help, right? And we aren't on there all the time,
Right.
you know. And as we go down from 35 to 49, well, they are on a little bit more. They're more savvy about computers, you know, but they're kind of building spreadsheets. They aren't
Right.
doing that
True.
stuff.
That's a good
You
point.
know,
Yeah.
but then the 18 to 25 are mainly gaming. I'm gonna say gaming, social media,
Gaming, social media,
You
for sure,
know,
depending on the gender
yeah.
for the most part. Yeah.
and a lot of them have more free time. They don't have kids to take care of, so what do? They're on the computer. They have more time.
Right.
You know, so I feel like, and that's why the 26 to 34, if you know, if they don't have any kids or if they do have kids, you know, that's why I feel like the numbers are lowering. You know,
Right.
because
right.
we won't have that time on the computer.
So Jonathan Haidt points out that he believes this change in technology is what is driving this mental health crisis and what is driving this data to do that hockey spike, right? Where things were just going along, and then all of a sudden, within a couple of 2-year period of time, it just spiked.
Yeah.
And so the first clue that he suggests is that personal computers and internet in the home. And I think that was in most homes by 2001.
I'd have to agree. I remember going to the computer lab and printing stuff off with that paper that had those little perforated sides, you know?
Right.
And I'm like, it would have been lovely to have a printer at home growing up, you know, and my own computer,
Yeah.
you know? But back in the day, you had to go to the computer lab.
Right.
So even to write papers.
Yeah. And then the second wave that he talks about was paired technologies. And so that's social media and that's that smartphone that you love so much.
I do. I love my iPhone.
Talk about it.
I know. I'm sorry. The Google phone's a little hard for me to work, but the iPhone is a little bit easier. So that's why I'm on the iPhone.
Uh-huh.
But you know, the iPhone, I remember when I first got it, I had the iPhone 4,
Yeah.
the little bitty one that came out. But you could plan everything. You could put MySpace on there. You had your Hotmail on there. Like, things were good. You know, then came Facebook. So then I switched to Facebook, you know. But I remember because I was thinking that's kind of when I really started connecting with old friends that I graduated
Oh, okay.
with.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, so in a way it was good, but also, you know, I'm thinking for like a young person that's trying to find their own identity, and really, I mean, I don't really compare myself, but you know, they're comparing themselves to other people
Right.
because they don't have the life experience that we have, you know, as far as thinking that if someone posts a picture that they are that beautiful,
Right.
you know, when they've used a filter.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think, you know, Stanford came up with this complex, the duck complex. And what that was about is that social media is kind of like this, where when you're looking into social media, what you're seeing is the top of that duck that's, you know, swimming across that pond or that lake. And what do you see when you see a duck out on the
they're graceful in the water, right?
yeah, smooth, graceful, beautiful, you know, and that sun's in the background reflecting off the water, right? Everything's beautiful. But if you look below, underneath that water, what do you see?
Fast pedaling.
Yeah,
Fast pedaling.
lots of stuff going on, right? It's effort. And
Yeah.
a lot of times that social media makes the viewer feel like that effort doesn't exist in that person's life.
Yeah.
So why is all this effort existing in my life?
Right.
And oftentimes that drives some, you know, disappointment, some sadness, some lack of
Well,
understanding.
That's where lack of self-esteem starts.
Right.
You know, I'm not as cute as the other girl, or that other girl has
You are.
a better body than I do. You know, it's like she's got better shoes, you know, and it's like we're looking at all of this on the on social media, and we don't really know the story behind it.
Right. In 2015, Jonathan shed some research from that year that was collected, and he said that 1 out of every 4 adolescents stated that they were online almost constantly. And then by 2022, that nearly doubled to 46%.
Was that when TikTok came out?
Uh,
Because my friend, that is a great app. I mean, you know, with Instagram and all that.
I love me some. I follow the pugs. I love the pugs. Okay, don't get me started. Shout out to Pablo. Okay, anyway.
Yeah. So for our American teens, you know, the birth of the cell phone really heightened what was about to come.
So yeah, so you know what we are is that front-facing camera, right? Opened up a whole new world of selfies.
Yeah.
I remember trying to figure out how to do that, and the kids are just great at it, right? But it changed girls' social lives, moved to being on social media platforms, and then what happened to the guys?
Well, they're not playing baseball anymore outside.
Yeah,
You know,
they're not
out
even going
there-
to get their driver's license.
They're not going to go. They're not dating.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the kids,
Or they're dating online.
yeah.
They're going
and-
out with somebody online. Okay.
Well, my best friend's online.
Yeah, and so boys are really involved. There's some differences. Boys are really involved in the gaming, oftentimes, and YouTube, Reddit, and unfortunately, they have access to hardcore pornography as well.
Another rise that we've been seeing is the rise in eating disorders with males.
Yeah.
So,
What do you think that's related to?
well, I'm going to say the comparison of bodies, that we look at, the bodybuilding, well, if, and especially growing up in a Hispanic household, there's got to be a member, a gordito, somebody being chubby, and we call him gordito. It just happens. It's a enduring, a caring. But when someone grows up with that and they're thinking, oh, why I'm always the fat one in the bunch, like,
Oh, yeah, that hurts my heart. It really does. It hurts my heart.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, for girls, the social media is it's tough. Not only are they comparing their, sometimes seeing their friends when they post that they're not included. So,
Yeah, it seems like loss was the ability to be fully present with people around them. And, how often do you see that happening where, everybody's on their own individual digital items, right?
yeah.
And there's really no communication going on unless they share something about their digital
Well,
feed, right?
I was thinking because I was watching a thing on TikTok at Grandma's house, and they showed a picture, and everybody at Grandma's house was on their cell phone, but they were at Grandma's house.
Okay, yeah.
So
Spending time with grandmother.
yeah. So you talk about not being present.
Right, yeah. So so that first part of that book really highlighted the increase in especially internal disorders, right? Anxiety, depression, increase in suicidal ideation, self-harm, and the stats are there.
Yeah.
And I don't think I said this earlier, but I feel this way very much. Even though the stats were really presented, I was not once bored with this book.
Oh no.
Just really, enjoyed and appreciated the enlightenment that I got from this.
Yeah.
And so as we continue to cover the anxious generation, get into part 2, part 3, part 4, and he's not, right now, we've been talking about the negative things that have come about, and why this generation is being called the anxious generation, but he's not going to leave us there. And so I just want to encourage you that if you come along for this journey and be a part of this, we're going to be looking at solutions as well.
That's the awesome part, is that he gives us so much information, and we will have a lot of takeaways, which I really like. So yeah.
Definitely. So we want to thank you for joining Heart to Heart Collaborations, a place where you are seen and heard. We are so grateful to be a part of your lives and to collaborate on this important journey. Please share this information with your friends and loved ones. Don't forget to like, don't forget to follow.
And subscribe.
Own your wellness.
Elevate your life.
Thank you for being a part.